drunk. So I just got done walking the sections and I don't think I should be here. They are much higher than my level. I am really nervous, really pretty scared to even attempt them. I really don't want to try some of that stuff. The goal, I guess, is still to make it through one, but really it's more just to survive. Stuff is really big, not a lot of room for error, and a lot of chances, a lot of places to crash. So a little nervous for sure, but gonna warm up and just give it my best, I guess. Well, I survived night one, so thumbs up to that, but it was definitely one of the hardest things I've done. I don't think I've ever been quite that nervous and scared to ride a trial in maybe ever. But it started out with each rider riding all 6 sections in one direction in 6 minutes, and it's a pretty crazy feeling. This is right when you're about to start, the crowd gets quiet, there's no music, and you just feel all the eyes on you, and I could see, you know, the best riders in the world watching me start, and that was really nerve-wracking. Ended up making a pretty lame mistake right away in section 1. Went to skid plate, had to push the bike up, and that was a section I thought I could get through. And then the next part was pretty tricky, but I took the safe route, went to skid plate, took some points. I think I actually pointed out of that one, so I got a 5, although I made it through it. So that was a disappointing way to start. Section 2, I got to the middle part of it, and you had to hold pressure on a pretty tall, skinny block, and it was hard to trust traction on that. I didn't know how slick it would be. I started falling right and just had to bail out of the section. Couldn't commit to the gap. Might have been able to force it, but I didn't want to risk a crash right away, so 5 that one. Then going on to number 3, you kind of missed the first line, just couldn't hold pressure. It's a pretty tricky one to hold pressure on, and then you had to rear tire gap across a pretty good gap with some big holes. And yeah, I went to skid plates, got a point there, and took the other optional line and got through it with 1, I believe. So yeah, good enough there, at least made it through 1, so felt a little bit better, at least after that one. Then number 4, I ended up riding without any dabs or big mistakes, but used a skid plate twice. One of them in the middle, just a pretty big step with no run, and you're up so high, it's just hard to commit to. So I had a point there, and then the next one on the diamond, I'm not really comfortable not using the skid plate on something like that when you really had to go as slow as possible to control the gap. You didn't want to overshoot the diamond and fall in the hole. And going on to number 5, rode the first part all right, made the first part clean, and then the next part was a pretty big gap and just no room for the bike. It was not a bike length up there. You had to just barely hold the tires, and I went to skid plate knowing I'd just try to get through it, and took a point to get set up and turned on the steep setup for the diamond, and another point using the skid plate on top, and then I think 1 more point on the tricky tight setup before the last gap. So at least made it through it, was all right with that. Just wanted to get through as many sections as possible. I wasn't even really worried about taking points or using the skid plate. I was just thinking, don't crash and try to get through stuff. So that was the plan. And going into the last section, number 6, I was really pumped up. The arm pump really set in at this point. It's pretty intense to ride 6 sections in 6 minutes. It doesn't sound like all that much, but when you're not breathing and you're feeling all the pressure, it builds up. So it took a little breather, had some time to catch myself there, and then ended up cleaning number 6. That was definitely my best ride of that loop, and happy to ended on that note, although I did crash out of the exit. The floor is really slippery and I was falling right, but I really wanted to stay on the section and yeah, forced myself to stay on the rock, but as soon as I hit the concrete, just both tires washed out, and kind of a good way to end the first loop, I guess. And yeah, the crowd was into it. It was really cool to have so much support. You can tell they're really watching every little move you make. They know what's going on, so that was probably one of the coolest parts of it, is that although I'm not making stuff look easy at all, they were still watching and into it, so really cool to have the crowd behind you. But overall, better than I thought for the first loop. Made it through a few sections and had some dumb moments, but yeah, that's part of the deal. Learning process. It's very difficult to jump in when everyone else is riding so well. These guys are the best in the world, and I'm pretty far behind them, but just to share the stage was cool and a good start, I thought.
By the stage, now regardez-le. Faites, le public. Wow. Fantastic race.
Yeah, I'm not in shape for this. This is so different from what I'm used to. Really give these guys a lot of credit for being able to do that. It's only 5 or 6 minutes, but man, that's intense. These sections are harder than anything I've ridden and really scary. So thank you guys for cheering me on.
Going into the final, it was 2 riders, rode each section individually and kind of stayed together. I rode with Toby Martyn, but I had to ride all of these first, and that was pretty tough for me, just not being able to see how the stuff worked or what the lines were that the guys decided to take. They know better than me, and I made a big mistake on section 1. I went for a line that nobody else even tried. I tried to gap off of one log to the next, and it was just a really far gap, and I spun on takeoff, front end dropped, and I jumped over the bars. Luckily, I got it out of it okay. The bike was fine besides a broken lever, so I could continue on after straightening it out, but I was pretty frustrated with that. I knew there were 2 other options, and I took the worst one. For some reason, I thought I could make the gap, and I had confidence for a minute. I'm like, yeah, I'm going for this. This is going to be sweet, and yeah, it just didn't end well. Didn't work out, and yeah, I was kicking myself for that one, but had to move on. And after that, number 2, I started off good, clean to the middle part, and I spun on takeoff going for the gap. It was an uphill concrete block, and you had to gap to another chunk that you had to hold pressure on, and I spun a bit, got squarely on takeoff, started falling and just barely to the right, and couldn't hold the line. Each line you just have to be so precise and on balance, and you can't afford to lose an inch, and I was a few feet off there, so 5 that one, had to bail off the section. A little frustrated there because I felt like I could have got through that one clean if I didn't spin maybe. So yeah, then moving on to number 3, I was pretty nervous about even trying that one. Just a really big double step, didn't have the confidence in it, and I went for it. Didn't make it, but at least got out of it okay. And then number 4 was probably my most surprising ride. Looking at it, I didn't think I would even make the first step. Ended up making that clean, and the second step was even bigger, pretty big gap, undercut up to the diamond, and I just didn't think I had that amount of lift in me, but I was able to make that clean as well. And then the rest of the section rode all right, even though the drop down was pretty sketchy and scary for me. I wasn't even sure how I was going to do it because I didn't think I'd get that far in the section, but kept it clean and went out that one for a clean. So that was a good ride for me, and happy to finally make it through a section after 5ing the first 3. Then number 4, I got a little sketchy in the beginning, just took a point on the setup, then used a skid plate in the middle, and at the end I ended up going for the stuff, which I found out no one else stuffed it. They all splattered it, rode up the last part, and I just couldn't get the front end down, had to jump back off of that one. That was a bit of a bummer because I probably maybe I could have gotten through it if I would have splattered it, but without seeing anyone else do it, I just wasn't sure on the angle and everything. So moving on to number 6, again, probably one of my best rides of the night. Ended up cleaning that one and really actually barely cleaned it. Dropping down in the early part of the section, started losing my balance and had to fight for every bit of it to hold on to it, because it wasn't an option to even take a 1. It was hold on to it or 5 it going out of the section. And I could hear the crowd get into it, and they could tell I was losing balance, and I held on to it. So that was a really cool part, to just know the crowd was watching that closely, that they could tell I really had to fight for that one. So to hold on to that and clean the rest of the section was a good end for me, and happy to end it on a good note. But yeah, definitely very difficult overall for me. One section I'd feel pretty good in, and the next one I felt like I shouldn't even be there, just making all kinds of mistakes and riding pretty sloppy. But overall, a positive experience, and happy to finish the first night. I also have to give a big thanks to Benoit's minder, who stepped up and minded for me. I didn't have a minder this weekend, so to have his help was huge. Just gave me a little bit of confidence to know that he could catch the bike. All the riders were really great to me, helping me as much as possible, and they're all super nice, and they seemed happy to have me there. So although I'm not on their level, it's fun to be riding with them and just watching how easy they make the stuff that I can't even comprehend. So cool experience so far. Now I'm heading to Montpellier, and I hope to take what I learned from night 1 and apply it to night 2. Hopefully have a bit more confidence and enjoy the experience.